In the land of the black soil, where the Nile River was the thread of life, there existed a world that lived in the shadow of death. It was a world of profound secrets, of sacred rituals, and of one man who stood as the gatekeeper between the mortal coil and the eternal journey. 4,500 years ago, he was known simply as the chief embalmer, a servant to the gods and, most importantly, to the god on earth, the Pharaoh. His workshop, the Wabet, or the place of purification, was a place set apart. It stood on the west bank of the Nile, the side of the setting sun, the land of the dead. The air within was thick and heavy, a strange perfume of natron salt, sweet resins, juniper oil, and the faintest, coppery scent of mortality. It was a smell that clung to his skin, his hair, his linen robes, marking him as one who conversed with the silent. He lived a life of isolation, respected yet feared. Mothers would quiet their children by whispering his title. He was a man who touched what no other dared, a priest whose temple was the human form in its final, fragile state. He had learned the art from his father, as his father had from his. It was a knowledge passed down not in scrolls, but in the slow, deliberate movements of the hand, in hushed chants spoken over the stillness of the embalming table. He knew the body as a farmer knows the earth. He understood its rivers of blood, its fields of muscle, its fragile scaffolding of bone. But more than that, he understood its spiritual anatomy. He knew that the body was not an end, but a vessel, a sacred ship that had to be made seaworthy for the perilous voyage through the underworld. The Duat. His days were spent in quiet servitude, preparing the nobles and viziers who had completed their time on earth. Each body was a sacred text he had to read and preserve. But he was always waiting. Every embalmer of his station spent his life waiting for one specific death. The death that would define his existence. The one that would test his skill, his faith, and the secret knowledge of his ancestors to its absolute limit. The death of the Pharaoh. The day it came, the sky seemed to hold its breath. A solemn procession of priests, their heads shaven and their white robes stark against the desert dust, brought the divine body to the Wabet. The sound of weeping from the capital city echoed faintly on the wind. A great wave of sorrow from a people who had lost their living God. But within the Wabet, there was no room for grief. There was only purpose. The great work had begun. The journey of the sun god, temporarily halted in his earthly form, had to be restarted. The fate of Ma'ah, the cosmic order of the universe, depended on it. The Pharaoh's body was laid upon a great alabaster slab, cool and unyielding. The embalmer washed the form with water from the sacred lake, mixed with palm wine, a ritual of purification to cleanse the vessel of all earthly trace. He was not just cleaning a body, he was preparing a divine statue for its eternal role. He began his litany of prayers, his voice a low, steady hum that filled the silence. He called upon Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of the dead, to oversee his hands, to make them steady, to make them worthy of this divine task. The first and most delicate task was the removal of the brain. To the people of Kemet, the heart was the seat of intelligence and conscience, while the brain was mere cranial stuffing. With a long, hooked instrument of bronze, he carefully entered through the left nostril, piercing the thin ethmoid bone. It was a procedure of immense skill, a blind navigation within the sanctum of the skull. Slowly, meticulously, he liquefied the soft tissue and drew it out. The vessel of fleeting thoughts and worldly memories was emptied, for the Pharaoh would not need them on his journey to the field of reeds. His wisdom was now one with the gods. Next came the incision. He took up the sacred knife, a blade of sharpened Ethiopian obsidian, its black glass edge sharper than any metal. Only one man, the slasher, was designated to make the cut. He made a swift, clean incision along the left flank, a wound that symbolically opened the body to the gods. Immediately after, the slasher was ritually chased away, pelted with stones and curses, a symbolic act to cast out the impurity of having harmed the divine vessel. Even in this sacred context. Now, the embalmer reached inside, his hands, consecrated and sure, moved with a practiced reverence. He was not a butcher, he was a priest retrieving sacred relics. He located and removed the stomach, the intestines, the liver, and the lungs. Each organ was a potential source of decay, a weakness in the eternal ship. but they were also essential parts of the pharaoh's being, and they too had to be preserved for the afterlife. The one organ he did not touch was the heart. The IB. This was the most crucial part of the soul. It was the vessel of the conscience, the witness to all the pharaoh's deeds on earth. It would be weighed in the hall of two truths against the feather of Ma'ah. If the heart was heavy with sin, it would be devoured by the beast Ammon, and the pharaoh's soul would be obliterated. If it was light and pure, he would pass on to eternal life. To remove the heart would be to condemn the king to ultimate oblivion. He left it nestled in its cavity, a silent, powerful anchor for the soul. The removed organs were washed, packed in natron, and then wrapped in fine linen. Each was placed into its own special container, a canopic jar. There were 4 jars, each with a lid carved into the head of one of the 4 sons of Horus. Imsati, the human-headed, guarded the liver. Happy, the baboon-headed, protected the lungs. Duamudif, the jackal-headed, watched over the stomach, and Kebesana, the falcon-headed, was the keeper of the intestines. These 4 guardians would protect the pharaoh's viscera for all time. With the body cavity now empty, it was washed again with palm wine and spices. Then came the most critical stage for preservation, the drying. The embalmer and his assistants brought in great quantities of natron, a natural salt harvested from the dry lake beds of the desert. It was a powerful, desiccating agent, the secret to cheating decay. They packed the body cavity with temporary bags of natron, and then buried the entire body in a huge mound of the crystalline white powder. For 40 days and 40 nights, the pharaoh lay entombed in this mountain of salt. The natron drew every last drop of moisture from the skin, the muscles, the tissues, leaving a hardened, yet recognizable form. This period was not idle. It mirrored the time the star Sothis, or Sirius, was invisible in the sky before its heliacal rising, which heralded the Nile's annual flood and the rebirth of the land. In the Wabet, this was a time of intense prayer and ritual. The embalmer fasted, purified himself, and recited the endless litanies that would protect the king's spirit as his body underwent this profound transformation. He felt the weight of eternity on his shoulders. A single mistake, a moment of impurity, and the bridge to the afterlife could crumble. When the 40th day dawned, the work resumed. The pharaoh's body was exhumed from its saline tomb. It was shrunken, darkened, and hard, but it was perfectly preserved. It was no longer a corpse, it was an effigy of eternal flesh. The temporary natron packs were removed from the cavity, which was then washed and filled with linen, sawdust, and fragrant herbs to restore a semblance of its original shape. The incision on his flank was sewn shut and covered with a sacred plaque bearing the protective eye of Horus. The Wadjet, magically sealing the body from any harm. Now, the final stage of artistry began, the wrapping. This was far more than simple bandaging. It was an intricate, layered ritual that would take another 15 days. The embalmer began with the head and neck, then each individual finger and toe, each arm and leg, wrapping them in impossibly fine strips of the highest quality linen. Between the layers, he and the priests placed powerful amulets, each with a specific purpose. A scarab beetle, the symbol of rebirth, was placed over the heart, its underside inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead, imploring the heart not to bear witness against the pharaoh during the final judgment. The Ankh, the key of life, was placed in his hands. The Djade pillar, for stability, was laid along the spine. The Eye of Horus, for protection and healing, dozens of them, a spiritual armor woven into the very fabric of his eternal form. As he worked, his lips moved constantly, reciting the spells that would activate each amulet, that would bind the spirit. The Ba, to this physical form. The Ka, he poured warm, dark resin over the wrappings at various stages, which acted as a waterproof glue, hardening the mummy into a single, solid shell. Hundreds of yards of linen were used, cocooning the king in a protective embrace. Finally, a large shroud was placed over the entire body, secured with linen bands. On the shroud, a likeness of the pharaoh was painted, in the guise of Osiris, the great god of the underworld. The first mummy, the man was gone, the god had been prepared. The 70 days were complete. The embalmer's work, the secret, sacred work, was done. He stepped back, his body aching, his spirit drained but serene. He looked upon his creation not with pride, but with a profound sense of cosmic duty fulfilled. He had fought a war against time and decay, and he had won. He had built an eternal house for a divine soul. The mummy was placed into a series of nested coffins, each a masterpiece of gold and artistry, and finally into a great stone sarcophagus. But the journey was not yet over. The final, crucial rite was the opening of the mouth ceremony. This was performed by the new pharaoh and the high priests at the entrance to the tomb. Using a special adze, they symbolically touched the mouth, eyes, nose, and ears of the mummified form. This magical ritual was believed to reawaken the senses, allowing the pharaoh to eat, drink, see, and speak in the afterlife. The embalmer watched this from a distance, a silent observer. His intimate, hands-on work was finished. Now, it belonged to the grand theater of public religion. He watched as the massive sarcophagus was hauled by men and oxen up the causeway to its final resting place. The colossal pyramid that had been built for this very purpose, a man-made mountain of stone, a stairway to the heavens. It was sealed deep within, surrounded by all the treasures, food, and furniture he would need for eternity. The last stone was put in place, and the tomb was sealed, not to be opened again until the end of time. The embalmer returned to his silent wabet. The scent of natron and myrrh was now a comfort, the smell of a promise kept. He washed his hands one last time, the sacred work complete. He was just a man, a mortal link in an immortal chain, but he knew that deep within that mountain of stone, his work endured. He had not just preserved a body, he had preserved the kingdom. He had ensured that the sun would rise again tomorrow, that the Nile would flood, that Ma'a would hold, all because the God King had been successfully launched on his journey across the star-strewn sky. To take his place in the bark of Ra, forever, his secret job of death was, in truth, the ultimate act of ensuring life. And in the quiet solitude of his workshop, surrounded by the tools of his holy craft, he began to wait for the next soul who would require his services on their journey west. Towards the setting sun,